Good evening, everyone. What an exciting occasion this is. The 20th Agent Pendergast book. I am raising a glass to the two of you and a toast because today is publication day. Well done, guys.
Oh, thank you. I
Thank
wish I had a glass to raise myself. I'm waiting till after the program before I hit the martinis.
Well, our events are BYOB. I thought you'd remembered that, but and this brings me, since I'm clutching a glass of wine, to my only critique of this book, which I've already written to the authors. But I mean, it's not like I'm a wine guy or gal, but even I know that you don't drink a heavy Burgundy with oysters. Which one of you decided to open a Chateau Lafite and then have your guy eat oysters and snails? I was appalled.
Oh, that
I'm
must
sure
have
it was my mistake. Before Doug can blame me for it, I'll take full credit for it. I probably had him eating tornadoes of beef, and then Doug changed it to oysters without changing the wine or something like
Ah,
that.
Oh,
well, that
no,
would
it's a
certainly
good
make much
blame.
more sense. I mean, a Chateau Lafite with beef would be gorgeous. With oysters, it'd be truly horrible. But anyway, guys, so 20 books, and we've been doing this together since 2012 with Lincoln. Before, we had done some with you, Doug, but we didn't figure out a technology to include Lincoln. So Zoom has actually taken us a step farther. I think it works really well.
Well, cheers.
Indeed.
20
So
books.
this book is called Floodless, and Agent Pendergast, unsurprisingly, since this is the 20th Agent Pendergast, is, well, why don't I let you guys talk about how they are hijacked from Florida to Savannah?
Okay, I'll be
oh,
happy to talk about it.
after you, my dear Alphonse. Lincoln, please.
All right. It's quite clear by the end of, we've had two books set in Florida, and by the end of each one, both Pendergast and his new partner, unwilling partner, Agent Cold Moon, have been very eager to get back to their respective normal jobs. Pendergast back in New York, and Cold Moon out to a new assignment in Denver. But Doug and I just weren't quite ready for them to go on their separate ways yet. For one thing, their partnership has worked out a lot better than we thought it was going to. I mean, we always thought it was going to be fun for at least one book in a still life with crows kind of way. Pendergast out of water, having worked with a partner. But they really got along well, and we had a lot of fun doing a book with both of them, doing two books with both of them. So we weren't quite finished. And Doug and I both think Savannah is probably the most creepy city in America, if not the world. And it seemed really a shame to let that helicopter go all the way up to Manhattan without dropping them off in Savannah for a mystery. And the question is, what mystery? And Doug managed to cobble together two events, or separated in time, that we managed to tie together, and it was a complicated, but it was an elegant for Doug. I mean, I can't take the credit myself, not. And we're really excited by it, and we're so pleased that we could wreck the city, but also give it hopefully some tourist dollars, because we love the place.
For readers, Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil might have been the first time that many, especially readers of crime fiction, although it was true crime, really spend any time in Savannah, which is a gorgeous old southern city. It still has some of its Regency architecture. It's located on a river, so it's a port, but it's not right on the seacoast. And it's just a gorgeous place. And I thought that Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, which was a phenomenal bestseller, apparently attracted so many people to it that it became overrun, with tourists and so forth. So it's been all the way to your book, I think, before anybody has seriously revisited Savannah. Would you say that's true, Doug?
Well, I think so. I don't know of any other novels recently set in Savannah. I'm sure there must be, but I just want to, I mean, Savannah really is a remarkable city. It's haunting. It's beautiful. It's got a Gothic feeling to it. It's got all kinds of legends and wonderful old houses and crumbling, mansions, and it just seemed like a perfect place for Pendergast. And Pendergast, of course, finds himself in Savannah very much in his element. But now Cold Moon doesn't like Savannah at all. He really hated Florida, and he doesn't like Savannah either. He can't wait to get to Colorado, where his next posting is as an FBI agent, but he's been short-stopped in Savannah. But we just had a lot of fun. Savannah is really a character in the novel. It's definitely like the museum in Relic, in the sense that it's a really unusual setting that affords us a great deal of canvas for creating this wonderfully creepy story about bodies that are turning up completely sucked clean of blood in Savannah. And of course, all the rumors of the famous Savannah vampire are resurrected. But Pendergast does not believe in vampires, or at least he's pretty sure they don't exist. So anyway, his investigation goes into some dark corners of Savannah. Let's put it that
You
way.
guys really like supernatural elements, whether they turn out to be supernatural or not, which we're not going to reveal, but certainly all the way from Relic forward, that's always been a fun part of reading the thrillers, what is true and what is not, and what's really scary and what isn't. But we haven't, I should mention that one of the great things about Savannah is the low country food. And despite my snide comment about the wine, for which I apologize, but I just couldn't stand it. They have a wonderful cuisine. A lot of it's seafood based, but before it became on the literary map, people went to Savannah to eat.
Yes.
Yes, and Lincoln's going to tell us about a dinner in a very nice restaurant in Savannah, a scene that he wrote. He insisted on writing. Tell us about that scene, Lincoln.
That was actually, I think, if what you're talking about is what I'm thinking of, is a lunch. And it may even be the dreaded lunch that Barbara referred to, where the Chateauneuf du Pape came up at the wrong time. We have a character in the book that is a literary or quasi-literary writer, a nonfiction journalist, slightly past his prime, who has come down to expose all the fakers of supernatural journalism, particularly the kind of, if you can imagine Al Capone's vault turned into a haunted house. He's come down to expose some of the people who make that kind of documentary. And unfortunately, he runs into this person who's a nemesis of his in his favorite restaurant, I think is Lafitte's in Savannah. And things go awry. And unfortunately, a wonderful dessert souffle ends up running down the back of his neck, which made me cry as I wrote it, because it's a terrible ending for any souffle to have. But I just wanted to add, before we leave the subject, that when Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil came out, something sank in me, because it seemed like such a precious secret, and then the film came out, and then the tourists arrived, but that's calmed down a bit, and it's a wonderful place to visit. And Doug and I both really, really encourage anybody who likes American history. There's some bad history, but there's a lot of fantastic history, beautiful architecture, as Barbara, as you say, wonderful food, low country food, soul food, everything you can imagine. And you should definitely see it, if only for the Spanish moss.
Well, one of the advantages of the tourists, if there is an advantage, is that it brought in enough money to do more of the restoration, because a lot of Savannah really needed, a lot of the houses really needed some serious conservation, so it's always a mixed blessing. I was in Turkey years ago, and I can remember that they just opened another of the famous old Roman baths, and they told us it was only because there was so much tourist money that they could now afford to do the excavating and the archaeology to, find more treasures in the city. So Doug, you're the archaeology person. I'm sure you've noticed that when there's an influx of money, that good things can happen, at least in regard to digging up the past.
Well, that's right. I mean, Italy, so many of the monuments in Italy were just decaying and falling apart until Italy in the last 20 years became this tremendous tourist destination. And now they're fixing everything up, and Pompeii is fabulous. They're excavating all kinds of wonderful things in Pompeii. I mean, they just found a grave yesterday in Pompeii, a beautiful grave of a slave who was freed and became a very important citizen of Pompeii. So,
So that's background for the book. And it's unfortunately not a huge amount we can talk about the story. But before, I forgot to do my bit. We do have copies of Bloodless. Until we get a final shipment on Friday, we can't actually recount how many copies we've got and what we can offer. But Patrick has put a link, or will put a link in the comments field. If you click on it, you can get on the waiting list. And we hope by the 1st of next week, there's a special insert that comes with the book from the Poison Pen. And we'll be able to then let you know what we can offer you. In this time of COVID and overburdened delivery services, books get stranded. So we have copies of Bloodless sitting in Chicago at the moment, which we hope will eventually get their way to Scottsdale. And we just all have to be patient while all this is going on. So guys, which of you decided to bring DB Cooper into this? Because in fact, the roots of this story go back to, do I have this right? November 24, 1971. Is that you, Doug, or was that Lincoln?
It was Doug's idea. I honestly had totally forgotten the story. And he, to his credit, said, this is the perfect way to begin anew. It was either that or another place I don't dare mention, in case we use that next. And this turned out to be the one that we both voted for. So Doug, wonderful. Congratulations.
Well, the way the novel came about was I've been fascinated with the DB Cooper hijacking, which is the only unsolved airjacking in American history. He collected a $200,000 ransom, and then he jumped out of the plane with a parachute and was never seen again. This was in 1971. They found some of his rotten money in 2000 in a sandbar in the Columbia River. But nobody knows what happened to him. And there are all kinds of rumors about who he became, or was he killed in the jump, or did he assume a new identity? So I thought, let's start with this hijacking and then figure out, who did DB Cooper become? What's the answer to this mystery? And Lincoln and I talked about it, and we spun out this story of Bloodless. Now, it's crazy the way it all comes together in the end, but it was really fun because the first couple of chapters in this novel are actually nonfiction. They're absolutely nonfiction. It's a non-fictional account of the DB Cooper hijacking to the point where he jumps out of the plane. And then our imaginations take over.
So Doug, did you have to do some research into airplane, construction and technology in 1971? Because isn't that a part of how Cooper was able to bring off his heist?
I did, yeah. I bought about 5 books on the DB Cooper hijacking, read through them. I looked at this. He was obviously very familiar with airplane technology. He knew the plane he was on. He was intimately familiar with how it operated. And FBI agents who looked into the case, most of them have believed that he actually must have worked for Boeing because he knew too much about this plane to be just even an aficionado wouldn't know as much as he did. One of the things he knew was that the aft stair was the only airplane model in the United States where the aft stair could be operated independently from the back and could not be shut off from the cockpit. And so he put everyone in the cockpit, and then he operated the aft stair and climbed out of the plane and jumped. And so anyway, it was really fun spinning the story out from spinning out the mystery. We had a lot of fun with that.
It was actually nice in a way to read that scene and to recognize that when something like that happened on an airplane in 1971, it was just about money. He wasn't, it wasn't about terrorism. It wasn't about, unruly passengers or whatever it was. I mean, everybody assumed and was trained, in fact, if I remember right, they were trained to, like bank tellers, to let the guy do the hijacking rather than endanger the plane and the passengers.
And I could be wrong about this, but I think that some of the passengers, I'm not sure about this, but as I recall, some of the passengers weren't particularly concerned because, taking it to Havana was such a common thing. People hijacking planes to Havana, okay, we'll have a day in the sun and then they'll fly us back free. It's we're not as innocent as that now. But I wanted just to add something to what Doug said, which is Doug had the idea of D.B. Cooper, but that was set in the early 70s. And we had to figure out not only who D.B. Cooper would have become all these many years later, but also how to hide D.B. Cooper in the story in a way, because, the reader's antenna are going to be alert all the time trying to find him. And that was something that I figured out. And then I proposed it to Doug and he added some great ideas to it. And then we had to figure out how to tie all this into this bloodless bodies turning up all over the place. Because as you know, ever since Relic, we love to tease authors, as you said, tease readers with the supernatural, but then pull it back at the end. So there's just enough credibility there so people know it's not fully supernatural. And Doug came up with a mind-bending answer to that. So this is really,
I'm sorry we can't talk about it. Sorry?
Really a team effort this time.
Wow. So Doug, being up in Maine and isolated you probably wrote that. Well, you wrote the book in lockdown. So did you find that being that way fired up your imagination? Because this is one of your more imaginative books.
Yeah, I think we went, I was in lockdown in Maine. I spent the whole winter in Maine. It was very nice. And Link was in lockdown in Florida. But I do think we really had nothing else to do but write. And I think we produced one of the best books we've ever written, actually. And I was looking at the Goodreads and some of the early reviews, and our readers seem to agree, which is very heartening. Really, this is a book a lot like Relic. It really harkens back to Relic, where Savannah becomes like the museum, this fabulous setting for this crazy, almost over the top idea, but all put together and all logical, and it all plays out. No one's going to be dissatisfied with the logic of it, I don't think, although I think some people might find it's a bit much. In fact, one of the reviews said, I think Preston and Child have gone too far this time. And I said, right on. I think we did go pretty far, but most readers seem to love it.
Why not? I think it's a hallmark of your series, that this happens. Some of your other books have been a little less supernaturally tinged, but why not in this one?
Well, one problem with this book is now that we've made our bed, we have to lie in it because it ends. It's the first of a trilogy, essentially. It's completely standalone, but it ends in a place where the story is going to continue. And we've made a real problem for ourselves.
Yes,
that we're going to have to work out.
I know. I was speculating about that while I was driving today back home from the dentist, and I thought to myself, I wonder how they're going to deal with. And then, of course, we aren't going to tell anybody right now what that is. But I'm going to be really interested in seeing what creative solution you have to the issue that you have raised. So Agent Cold Moon, he obviously is unhappy. He's unhappy that he finds himself rerouted to Savannah, and he seems unhappy at working with Pendergast, but he doesn't have a lot of choice. Do you guys put that in there just for conflict, or are you planning to, is he really going to go to Denver if he survives this book? Have you thought about that? You don't want to say?
He's in Denver now. Yeah, he is in Denver.
Only temporarily, though.
So you envision, one of the fun things about thrillers is to have the guys have conflict within the investigating operation. And so Cold Moon and Pendergast have a sort of natural clash, right?
Well, they do. You know, Pendergast is a loner. He likes to work alone. He was very much opposed, our readers who've read the earlier books know, to having a partner. But Cold Moon, it turns out, is a pretty unusual partner. And Pendergast has come to respect him tremendously, and Cold Moon to respect Pendergast. But on a personal level, they both irritate each other. I mean, a lot of Pendergast's foibles get on Cold Moon's nerves. You know, his silence, his holding his cards too close, his cryptic comments. I mean, Cold Moon is a very direct FBI agent. He just says it like it is. And Pendergast is very indirect and devious. And so the two of them are really different.
Lincoln is part of that generational, do you think? I mean, Cold Moon is definitely younger than Pendergast.
It's part of it generational, and it's also part of his upbringing. You know, we make a great deal about how he loves the camp coffee he grew up with, which is boiled and boiled and boiled within an inch of its life. And, you know, this really upsets Pendergast and Constance, who fancy themselves as gourmets. But one of the things we really enjoyed about the relationship is the cliche would be, by the end of the book or books, Cold Moon would have come around and seen that, you know, Pendergast is really a great guy, and Pendergast would say the same thing, and they'd want to work together. But that's not what happens. You know, Cold Moon, at the end of the book, he's still eager to get the hell out to Denver and get started. That isn't to say that once he's there, he won't realize, as Doug intimated, that he had it better than he thought. But we like turning that little trope around on his head, you know, and so that at the end, you're a great guy, but I'm still headed for the airport.
Right. Well, but his superiors at the FBI can always alter his reality, you know. I mean, and you guys get to do that since you're the gods of your books. You mentioned Constance. So, Doug, I mean, we can't talk a lot about it, but Constance is definitely a player in this book, and she's in Savannah.
Well, she is, and it turns out that she has really become, in a strange way, a very important assistant or amanuensis or whatever you want to call it to Pendergast. I mean, she has abilities and talents that Pendergast doesn't have. Research abilities to talk to people, to get information from them that Pendergast can't, and to delve into the archives and ferret out the secrets of the papers in an old dusty library. So she's got a lot of talent, and Pendergast is using her more and more. And it turns out at the end of this book, Constance, well, I guess I better not say, but she really,
No.
yeah, she takes her life into her own hands in a big way, upsetting everybody.
So, Lincoln, I thought about you, and Constance is like the person who, what do I want to say? She's like the provisioner. She's the one that gets them into this luxury hotel in Savannah. So I thought you probably really enjoyed that. Do you know Savannah? Did you actually stay there?
Yes, I spent a couple of weeks on Skidaway Island, and I've also stayed in several of the hotels down by the river, and also in the historic district. And Doug has stayed there too, but I stayed there a long time. And the house where we had them stay, the Chandler house, is an amalgam of all the places that I stayed. And it's kind of funny because even though Constance has not spent much time out of New York, Savannah really spoke to her. It's the old Southern charm, which she's used to, that kind of hospitality, as well as some of the bite and the incisiveness that lies under that hospitality. And just the spookiness of the place struck a chord in her. But as Doug said, she really takes her life into her hands. Although I would argue that she's never really valued her life all that much when it comes to Pendergast. She's waded in there and put her life at risk for him on several occasions. They're still fixing some of the glass of the botanical garden from her last visit there.
Right. well, Savannah's a real maritime city. As I mentioned, it's perched up there on the bluffs above the river. The National Trust had a really great maritime museum there. I don't know if it's still there, but I remember last time I was in Savannah visiting it. And because there's a lot of stuff down on river level, but the main city
Right.
is up above. You go up the cliffs, and so it's not on the river in the way that like Richmond is, or someplace, where the river, or New Orleans, where the river flows right by.
Those
So
old stairs are still there,
are
the
they?
old stairs, almost like, in an Italian city, there are many, and they've kept them in great shape, as well as that River Street, the cobble street down by the water. You
Right,
have
and
to come out
because
of it.
it's upriver, it's protected from hurricanes and stuff in a way that an actual Gulf port is not. So, it seems to have held on to its long history for a great time. So which one of you decided? Was it you, Douglas? Because it always seems to be you that does this. Was it you that decided on draining the bodies of blood?
Well, that was my idea, and I read years and years ago, I read an article about how in the old when the Soviet Union collapsed and people were desperately poor, bodies started turning up in a park in Russia somewhere, drained of blood. And what it was were people selling the blood. They get these drunks, in the park, and they'd knock them out with something and drain their blood, and of course that would kill them, but then they'd sell the blood on the black market, and blood was worth a lot of money in the old Soviet Union. So I had that idea, but of course we didn't do that. The what is draining the blood are not black market sellers of blood. It's a much more complicated thing in our novel, but that's where the idea came from. It was just creepy
In
idea.
a way, I'm sorry, what?
Well, I was just going to say the idea, if they found these bodies drained of blood, they're as pale as marble, just lying on the ground. And that was such a creepy vision for me. I thought, well, we'll have to put that in a novel.
I didn't hear this before. This was in Russia, you said?
Yeah, it was.
Drunks?
Yeah, it was
Drunks
back in the early 1990s. They never caught him, but it was some serial killer or group that were, knocking out drunks and draining their blood and selling it.
Did they charge more depending on what the proof was?
That's a question only a crime writer would probably ask. Actually, it's the same thing as the black market for organs. There's numerous examples in crime fiction and possibly in real life where people were killed in order to harvest their kidneys, or some other organs that were in high demand, or people in very poor situations would sell an organ, sell a kidney or sell part of their liver or something. So the blood is not really any different than that.
Coma. Yeah.
That was a bit like the novel Coma, which is, I think, one of the best novels that Robin Cook wrote, where they were killing, where they were harvesting people, turning them into making, harvesting their organs to sell. But that has nothing to do with our novel. Nothing like that goes on in our novel. We came up with a much more interesting idea.
Oh, cool.
More elegant idea, for sure. You did. I thought that the introduction of, we've all kind of missed the reporter. You guys like to have a journalist or something in your stories. And so the documentary filmmaker, seems to me, was kind of a nifty substitute for doing that. But also there's been a real trend this year to have writers as main characters, or as occasionally bad guys, but more often as the main characters in novels. Jean Corlitz's book, The Plot, for example, just a host of them. And I've been wondering if during the pandemic, writers have turned inward to some degree, and decided to harvest themselves, their own careers and their own whatever it is, and introduce them into their books. Why did you put the documentary film guy in there, Lincoln? What was the rationale?
there were two rationales. One is because we couldn't have Roger Smith back there. We couldn't figure out a way to bring him in. And he had been the journalist in the prior two books. And he gave us a unique perspective. You know, it's always nice because we can't really show the reader too much from Pendergast's own point of view. It's always nice to have numerous points of view to show Pendergast doing different things. And as a result, the documentary maker made a wonderful stone in your shoe. You know, I mean, he was just, you know, he was a terrible pebble. And we had a lot of fun with him, as well as with the sort of subplot of him and the historian that Hayes has a history with, who wants to write a book about these fakers and would-be spiritualists and mediums, and also show up the documentarian at the same time. And through all that glides Pendergast imperiously, and you know, it just made for a lot of fun and a way to pull away from the drained bodies and you know, the shadow of the Spanish moss, you know, lying over them.
Well, sure, I can certainly see, you know, from a point of view or perspective that it would be useful. Doug, you know, since you are a journalist yourself and you've written some amazing nonfiction, are you always kind of drawn to bringing in somebody like you into the stories?
I am. You know, they say a writer should write about what they know, and that's what I know. But the other wonderful thing about a journalist is that they have a license to ask questions, to pry, to poke their nose where it doesn't belong. It's sort of like a detective. I mean, that's what the detective is supposed to do, or Pendergast, or any detective in a novel. But the journalist also can play that role. And so I think that's why journalists make such good characters in novels, because they're prying, you know, people. They just are sticking their noses in other people's business and making other people upset and getting themselves into trouble.
Right. So, I mean, sometimes they put themselves in jeopardy, and, you know, that becomes a whole subplot, so to speak. Right. Let's go back and talk about The Scorpion's Tail for a moment, because the paperback has just come out recently. It's your second Nora Kelly book. After, I'm trying to remember the name of the first one.
Old Bones.
Old Bones.
Old
Thank you.
Bones.
Gosh, you'd think I could remember that. And you have a new one coming out in February, a third book for Nora Kelly. Talk to us a little bit about Nora, because I think she's a fascinating character and quite different than Pendergast. Lincoln, what you know, how did she come to be, and how did she attract you?
She first showed up in Thunderhead back when we was writing standalone novels, as a archaeologist working with the Santa Fe Institute. And then she sort of we liked Nora a lot. She was really, she had a lot, you know, she was brazen, she was brave, she was intrepid. She had a lot of interesting knowledge and expertise that really helped the kind of books we wrote, and the mysteries that we set up for people to read about. And so she appeared in The Cabinet of Curiosities, which was a seminal book for, you know, for bringing the later Pendergast books. And as time went on, she married Smith back, and that, you know, ended tragically. And she sort of went off into the sunset. And as Doug and I, as we were winding down the Gideon Cruise series of books, we began to think of another series. And it occurred to us that Nora Kelly, living in Santa Fe, you know, where Doug can add a lot of the color, and Corey Swanson, who has just graduated from the FBI Academy, would make a great team, because she could dig things up, but she couldn't, you know, act on it, and which Corey could. And Corey Swanson, she may find some things that have a certain degree of archaeological or other historical value that she doesn't know what to do with, and Nora does. So it seemed great for us to have these two women that had both starred in Pendergast stories to work together. We've even thought of adding a third to that series, but so far we haven't done that, because the chemistry between these two is so good.
It is good, and the setting is wonderful. Doug, I mean, I really miss Gideon Crew, but I do think that you guys were really faithful to your readers and that you set him up with a particular problem. And, there was always the chance that he might miraculously beat it. But in the end, we don't know for sure. But do you think it was always a series that was going to come to an end because of the premise?
We did conceive of it as being a limited series. We didn't want to have an open-ended series. Now, we always said to ourselves, well, who knows, he might get some miraculous cure and we can keep going with him. But as we got to the last novel in the series, it seemed that in fact we were done with him. Not that we didn't like him, but it was just that this was the end. And of course, we don't know what is going to happen to him. That's still up in the air, but he might come back, but it seems unlikely. And we're just having so much fun with Corey and Nora right now that I just can't see going back. Our new novel that we're working on now, that we're almost finished with, called Diablo Mesa, also takes place in New Mexico. And it's just a crazy, fabulous novel, a great idea. It's a bit like Bloodless. It's pretty over the top.
So
If
that's
some
the
nice
book that-
I'm sorry, I was just going to add that if some nice producer or showrunner comes to us who happens to love Gideon Crew, there might just be a miracle cure out there, that we could introduce into the story. But for now, he's rocking on in his rocking chair, and he has no plans to come back, nor do we to bring him back.
Yeah, but you know what? You guys have created like this whole universe, the Preston and Childverse, whatever you want to call it, and you can pull characters from one thing into another. I mean, you've done that, and your readers like it. It's almost like Easter eggs, they get a really nice surprise. They're reading along, and oh look, here's Pendergast in New Mexico briefly, and I think that makes it fun. So yeah, Gideon could, who knows, show up in the right story. You can have to see. But anyway, the Nora Kelly book is, and Corey, is scheduled for February 15th, I think it is, called Diablo Mesa. So that's exciting to look forward to that. I thought Scorpion's Tale was absolutely fabulous. I really loved it. Of course, I like the Southwest, and I thought you took advantage of the landscape and the culture tremendously well. We're gonna, Doug, we're doing an event for Tony Hillerman's biographer, Jamie McGrath Morris, on October 14th. And I couldn't help but think about so many of Tony's books when I was reading Scorpion's Tale.
Well, that's good. Yeah, it definitely is a subject that Tony would write about. And Diablo Mesa also takes advantage of New Mexico and its legends. And in fact, one of the biggest and most famous mysteries of New Mexico is really at the center of the story. And that is the Roswell incident. And I won't say any more about it, but that is the heart of the story, is about the Roswell incident. But not in any way you think can predict. There are no aliens in this book, or at least maybe not.
That's a pretty hot topic at the moment in real life, So I think that'll be fun because there certainly has been quite a lot written about it in actual news. So we'll find out. Anything else you guys would like to say about Bloodless before we turn to questions from your many fans?
Well, I think we might want to mention that a lot of the action in Bloodless takes place in the Bonaventure Cemetery. And the cover of the book shows a statue in that cemetery. It has got to be one of the most evocative cemeteries. Of course, anyone who read Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, that cover of that book also showed a statue in the Bonaventure Cemetery.
Right. And she shows up, as you can see, she shows up on the chapter headings right there. The same lady, the same image that's on the cover.
That's right. She's like the avenging angel. But both Lincoln and I spent quite a bit of time exploring the Bonaventure Cemetery. And again, it's just the most fabulous, most evocative and haunting setting. Any novelist would just die to use that setting.
So Lincoln, do you like reading tombstones?
Yeah, I do, and rubbing them too when they get the chance, although that's frowned upon now. Um, I just wanted to echo what Doug said, and that, just like in our very first book, Relic, the museum was probably the main character. The city of Savannah, both its historic cemeteries, its historic buildings, the creepy trees, the cuisine, all are the main or a main character. And a lot of times, I often was reminded of Relic as we were writing this, because it does skate close to the supernatural, but it doesn't go over the edge. And we just have had 30 years of writing experience percolating into to add that extra fillip of D.B. Cooper in there to make it even more, complicated and hopefully interesting. So
Those creepy trees that are draped with all that beautiful Spanish moss or occasional mistletoe, I think, it is the low country area. It really is absolutely beautiful. If you've ever been to Hilton Head, and you can drive from Hilton Head to Beaufort to Savannah, and it's Charleston actually, and go the whole way. It's a very special part of the country. It has, we've talked earlier, it has its own food, it has its own culture. There's nothing else quite like it. So it's great that you went to visit it. And geographically, it works out because it's between Florida and New York, as you've already said. So not that hard to divert a plane. Patrick, do you want to come join us? And if you've got questions of your own or questions from the audience?
Sure. Yeah, lots of people watching, lots of great questions coming in. Let's see here. Karen, and actually several others, ask, where does the adaptation of a Pendergast TV series stand currently?
Well, it doesn't stand at all. Unfortunately, they were working on it at Paramount. It went through one executive after another, approving it. And when it finally got to the top executive, he killed it. So
Is there a
unfortunately,
reason?
he had two shows and he was going to pick one and he picked the other one. I think the reason is because he did not have any literary taste. A lot of these Hollywood executives, they don't read. So that's what we think. He had no taste, right, Lincoln?
yes, that's the kind of question that will make two grown men cry, because this happened to us several times, but we never got as close as this. And we keep seeing TV shows spring up on all these networks that are so hungry for new material, and we keep thinking, we've got 20 books, and they were going to make one season out of this cabinet in that case. And I'll see a bit of Pendergast in this series and a little bit of a different character of ours there, and we just shake our heads when the same kind of stuff is recycled in our minds. I suppose everybody thinks that their children are the best, but
so much with Hollywood depends on, its luck, its timing, and it's attracting the interest. Well, Doug, you've already been through that with George Clooney and, The Monster of Florence. You just never know how it's going to pan out.
Well, they are now making a television series out of The Monster of Florence.
Are they?
Instead of a movie, and it really is moving forward. They've cast Antonio Banderas as Mario Spezzi. They haven't cast me yet, but they've got a lot of interest. So it really does seem to be happening.
Well, in many ways, don't you think long form television is better suited to telling a complicated story than a movie is just so short?
Absolutely. I think, look at Game of Thrones or Breaking Bad or The Sopranos. I mean, those stories are tremendous, very complex. They're like gigantic novels. They're like a War and Peace. And a movie can't do anything like that. So yeah, I think long form television is really the most wonderful form of telling a story on screen that there is.
And it certainly suited to Pendergast too. He's not episodic. He has a whole metaverse you could draw in from season to season. So that's our pitch. That's our desperate pitch.
Yeah, we hope a Hollywood mogul is listening, right? If you're out there.
You know what? If the Monster of Florence does well, it might be your ticket to Pendergast, because it seems that if somebody has any kind of successful series, that it mushrooms on into other things that they write.
Well, the problem with Pendergast is that the rights are owned by Paramount to his character, because they bought the rights for Relic.
Oh, right.
So only Paramount can do a television series. Nobody else can. If it was open and anyone could do it, there would definitely be a TV series featuring Pendergast, because there's been lots of interest from other studios, but the only studio who can make it is Paramount, and they won't sell the rights to any other studio. So they're just sitting on them.
Maybe we need gang warfare, a cyber bully mob. We'll have to figure that out. Anyway, Patrick, another question.
There are several people asking, who would you cast to play Pendergast? Somebody's suggesting Paul Bettany. Any casting choices?
It changes, it changes every every several years. In the old days, it was Christopher Walken, then it was Matthew McConaughey, then it was Benedict Cumberbatch, and now there are many new choices, including the fellow playing Loki is one that we hear a lot as being a possibility.
But now we know what Pendergast looks like exactly. Now we know. In fact, those people who ordered the signed books from the Poison Pen are going to find out what he looks like exactly.
Indeed, if slightly delayed, for which we apologize, but we're hoping that we will be able to start shipping the books with Pendergast first of next week, but we're at the mercy right now of the delivery system. So here we are. Right. Anything else, Patrick?
Oh yeah, lots of stuff. Let's see. Rose is saying no Matthew McConaughey. Okay.
Okay.
And then let's see.
Matthew.
Tom Huddleston is another casting choice. Several people are weighing in on that.
He's the Loki.
The Loki character, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he's very good. We watched him as Loki, and I think he actually would make an interesting Pendergast, although they'd have to bleach him.
A lot of buzz about him recently.
Several people have asked about your own solo novels. Do you each have solo projects coming up or in the works?
Not me.
I have got a novel which Barbara has been kind enough to ask me about for years now. And I think I can say with some authority, the next time we meet, I can give you a date when it's being published. But until then, it has to remain a secret.
So
Although I
not
will
your
say that yes?
Not your enigmologist?
Oh yeah, he'll be in there, yes. But
good.
what he's doing, I can't say. I have to say I breathed a huge sigh of relief when I saw a new series was coming out last week, which I thought was going to cover exactly the ground that I've been trying to prepare for the last 5 or 6 years, but I was wrong. So.
And you'll be happy to know, those of you watching, that Bloodless has a little Easter egg for the enigmologist therein, which I really enjoyed. I meant to mark the page so I could read it, and then I forgot, but it's great to see him there. Yeah. And Doug, what about you? I know that you've written a preface to an interesting book, because we're going to be talking with you and the author. It's a nonfiction book about archaeology on November 4th. So you want to tell us about that?
That's right. It's a book being published by National Geographic, an absolutely fabulous, beautiful book about lost tombs. It's really the 100 greatest archaeological discoveries of the last century. Lost tombs and treasures that have been found and things like that. It's really, really an interesting book. So I wrote the preface to it and talked a lot about the lost city of the monkey god, which was the subject of my book, and that discovery is in this National Geographic book. So anyway, so definitely show up in November, and because I think we're gonna have a really interesting project and program talking about that book and some of these fabulous discoveries.
I did too. One of the great things about Zoom is that all of a sudden you can get an email from Disney saying, want to talk about, this wonderful book we're doing. And by the way, since you know Doug Preston, why don't you ask him to join us? And I'd be, okay, but I think it'll be wonderful fun. The author's name is Day, D-A-Y, and the event is November 4th at, I believe, 6 o'clock. And believe it or not, daylight savings time does not end till November 7th. So it'll still be 6 o'clock, will still be 9 o'clock Eastern time and 6 o'clock Pacific time for us. Anything else, Patrick?
Yeah, I lost the question, but the gist of it was the guy was saying that it would be a great idea to have a Pendergast novel presented almost like an old time radio show. And that is a really cool idea. Let's see.
You mean an audio version?
An audio version. I mean, like the audio book theoretically, but presented as an old-fashioned radio program. That would be very cool.
That's a very creative idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
You remember Suspense? I used to be terrified. I would lie awake, with my little radio on. I was a little kid with the covers over my head, and those gates would go, and your heart would stop. And radio actually had a way to scare you far greater, I think, than television. You guys are old enough to remember when, that kind of stuff was broadcast on the radio, but I mean, it was really scary.
Yeah. I think it was Mark. He said a podcast kind of approach, maybe. Get that old Wurlitzer going, put out the great sound effects.
Well, there was a game maker called Infocom, and they made text-only games. And their ad was, we put our graphics where the sun never shines, meaning it's all in your imagination, it's in your brain. And so when you listen to a radio play, all you have are the sound effects in your own imagination, what's going on. And I think that's what adds to the scare value.
Right. Let's see. Sunny asks, what would a daily writing routine look like for each of you?
Well, it's probably a little different. I think Lincoln tends to write, well, I don't know how Lincoln writes. I'll let him tell you. I generally am a 9 to 5 kind of person. I do my morning workout and then I go to my office and I write generally for a couple of hours and then spend a couple of hours doing other things. There's a lot of stuff you have to do as a writer that does not involve writing. I'm also president of the Authors Guild, which is the oldest and largest association of authors and journalists in the country. And that involves quite a bit of work. So I've spent a lot of time on that. And then I generally knock off around 4 or 5. But how about you, Link? What is your schedule?
I get up around 2 in the afternoon, take a swim, and then answer a few emails and then pretend I've done some work and go home. No, my schedule is less regular than Doug's. But I usually write in the afternoons and in the evenings. I found that that depending on what I write, certain kinds of tasks are easier to do. Like, for example, if I have a chapter that's mostly conversation, it's easy to write, and I can write 4, 5, or 6 pages of that, assuming the conversation is interesting. But if I have a chapter where I'm simply told, Constance is going to go into this jewelry store and rob it, and she can only get diamonds of a certain size, then I have to do a lot of thinking and research. And just that kind of research and thinking, it takes a kind of a creative toll on you. And even though it's not physical, I feel as wiped out from doing that, a 3-page chapter like that, as I would from a 10-page chapter of dialogue, which is why I'm sorry that our screenplays have never taken off.
Has it changed for you, Lincoln, since you moved to Florida from New Jersey? Do you find that your day is different now?
Well, no. And the only reason is because of COVID. There were a couple of years when I was a snowbird, as they say. And then for the past 3 years, I've been here. And by the time I'd moved to a house to store all my books in, COVID hit. And so being a natural recluse, while I hate what's happened to us, it hasn't changed my my manner of working, except that I can go outside all year long. I just have my fill of snow. I have my fill of snow.
Right. So Doug, you go back and forth from Santa Fe to Maine, and then you take trips in between. Does your schedule change at all with your location?
Not really. In Santa Fe, I've got an office downtown. So I either drive there or walk there. It's about a mile from my house. And I love that because I get out of the house completely. And it's a really nice office. In Maine, I have a little 8x10 shack in the woods that's about 300 yards from my house. It's just far enough down a trail that nobody bothers me. So if somebody wants me, they have to call me on the phone instead of knocking on my door. I hate being interrupted when I'm working. It's really greatly disturbing to have someone just walk in. And unfortunately, you know, if I were a doctor or a lawyer, no one would walk in. But when you're a writer, people don't think you're really busy. So you do get interrupted.
That's really fun. I've talked to a lot of British authors over this long course of Zoom and 500 plus events, and I'm always surprised at how many of them are they're in a shed in their garden. That is their office, and that's where they have things set up. And you know, it's so you're doing kind of the shed in the garden thing.
You can see my little office here. I've got some books on this side, and there's a little window there, and a door behind me, and it's literally 8x10. There's only room for me.
I love it. It's like one of those tiny houses that people talk about, you know, so it's a tiny office.
It cost me $5,000 to build my office. And then my accountant said, we're not even going to bother deducting it with the IRS because it's so worthless. Your office is so worthless. It's not even worth depreciating.
The thing about Doug's office is it's at the end of like a 3-mile long dirt road, and you know it gets darker and darker as you get closer and closer. And I spent too many summers way out in the woods of New Hampshire, so you know I could never live out where Doug does, but I can certainly see how it can help his imagination.
I have a couple of questions here. You know, there are fans of Diogenes and detractors as well. Seems like kind of equally voiced. They're wanting to know, will we see Diogenes again?
When you say detractors and adherent, you mean people who want to see him again?
Want to see him? Yeah, yeah.
He's going to show up, but he hasn't told us when.
How about Margot? What's Margot up to?
Well, that's a good question. Margot is sort of continuing to do her usual work, and she might enter into a story at some point, especially perhaps into the Cory Nora series. She might show up and really upset things. Who knows? Lincoln, what do you think? Margot going to show up?
I think so. Yeah, I think she had some post-traumatic issues to deal with after the last book we subjected her to, but she was our first heroine, our first hero, and I can't believe that she'll stay away for very long.
There are a couple of people, actually one person would like to hear one of you guys pronounce Pendergast's first name.
Go ahead, Doug.
Aloysius.
Aloysius, there you go. Let's see. Where in New Jersey did Lincoln live? New Jersey native here.
I lived in first I lived in Short Hills, and then I lived in Morristown.
Well, what about Hoboken?
Oh God, I forgot. Yeah, I lived in Hoboken back when I took my life in my hands just walking home.
And Sycamore Lane, what town was that in? Or
that was up in Westchester or north of Westchester. Yeah, in Mayapack. That's where Doug and I sat in Adirondack chairs, drinking scotch and trying to figure out how to write Relic. Oh my
we didn't get very far with the scotch. It's like we quickly realized that we were either going to drink or create, but we weren't going to do both at the same time.
Here's actually a good question from Mark. He asks, how much rewriting or reworking do you do on average? You know, going back over chapters, making changes, etc.
Well, unfortunately, Lincoln's prose has to be
Here
rewritten.
it comes.
No, I'm kidding. We rewrite each other, and that is a little bit fraught, but actually, Lincoln improves my prose and I improve his. And then we pretty much go over the manuscript. Probably Link will go over it maybe 3 or 4 more times, 2 or 3, and I'll go over it 2 or 3 more times. So probably if you add it all up, we probably, I would say 6 to 8 revisions before the final product. Well, Link, what do you think?
I think that's exactly right, but I'd add to that that we spend more time now than we used to talking back and forth about the chapters. You know, we do a lot more assigning. Doug will take a certain sequence of chapters, I'll take a certain person, and as a result, we each have responsibilities. You know, we have the agency on that particular subject. So we spend a lot of time talking out what the chapters have to contain so that by the time we actually put finger to word processor, we know what's going to go on. So even though Doug changes what I write, you know, I change what he writes, I think there's less of that that goes on than say 15 years ago. And also I've learned from Doug with each new book, I've learned what to do, what not, occasionally what not to do. And I think same has happened for him. So that the rewriting that goes on is more in terms of making sure the plot fits together, or I take out his quote little darlings and he takes out mine. Or if I make a joke that's too off color, he'll remove that, you know.
Yeah, Lincoln will put in sometimes the most horribly obscene, outrageous and disgusting things in the manuscript just to watch me take them out.
Now that Doug has said that,
Provocation.
there's some Easter eggs that Doug has stuck in there, so to speak, that no one has discovered yet. And someday someone will tell us, did you really mean that? And
yeah, they even went by Lincoln and they got into print. And then I
yeah,
thought, "God, we're going to hear from our readers, but we don't." The
one of them
double entendres that are really, really awful, but our
two
readers
got by
haven't
me.
picked them up yet.
Two double entendres got by me.
There are a couple of questions about just how did the two of you meet? Lincoln, you were Doug's editor at first, isn't that right?
Yes, the short version of the story is that I worked at St. Martin's Press. I was a huge fan of the Museum of Natural History. I was interested in signing up someone to write a armchair history and backstage tour of the museum. Doug was the ideal person working for their magazine. I took him to lunch at the Russian Tea Room, pitched the idea. He ran with it. He gave me a midnight tour of the museum that scared the hell out of me. And we decided we should write novels together and stop making the kind of salaries that editorial assistants make, or at least try. And then 6 years later, Relic got published.
Russian Tea Room, you break my heart even mentioning it. I really miss the Russian Tea Room. It was just such an amazing place with some of the most, you couldn't decide whether the decor was tacky or really just wonderful. You had to be there.
It's still there.
Is
My
it?
daughter-
I
my
thought that
daughter
it
went
had
there.
wound up.
My daughter went there recently. Yeah.
Well, I'm delighted to hear that. Wonderful. Then I will go
It
back. We have a
broke down.
version of it here called Durant's in downtown Phoenix. And every Christmas they decorate it much like the old Russian Tea Room.
The red banquettes and the Bellini and caviar still there.
Wonderful. Anything else, Patrick?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple things. This is kind of related to that podcast idea. This is a good idea. He says you guys could also do a great podcast series starting from your first book and discuss how it was written, how it developed, interesting backstories, etc. And maybe do one for each book. That would be deep cut for the fans.
Very interesting.
Yeah, a lot of people seem to like that.
We could even call it deep cut. That's a good,
Deep cuts.
yeah.
Okay, so Nadine's getting right down to it. She says, tell me about those guitars. Love Nadine.
Yay, Nadine.
It's a Tobacco Sunburst 335.
Yes, and that's a custom shop Gibson Les Paul over there. I also have other ones over here. Excuse me a second.
We got to ask him about the shirt too. That's a great shirt.
It is a great shirt. I
Yeah.
agree.
My parents had a rug just like this back in the 60s. So and I have other ones that I play, you know.
Wow.
Here's an Eric Clapton Strat. Those are just so beautiful. And I am such a bad player that they made better art than they did instruments. So.
Well, Lincoln also has a beautiful Steinway B piano, which he plays quite well.
And Doug has pianos at both his houses, and to his credit, after writing every day, he relaxed by playing some incredibly difficult Chopin nocturnes that are all black keys, and I'm very jealous.
That's wonderful. I know when Doug is in Maine, he's spending some of his time helping his wife with her oyster farm, which I think is absolutely fabulous. How's the oyster crop, Doug?
Oh, it's a great year for oysters. We've been eating oysters all the time. It's been a fantastic year.
I'm circling back, Lincoln, to the idea that Doug did you in with the wine because oysters were on his mind rather than turn it
Send me
over.
some Chateau de Pop to eat with those oysters.
I love it. So
we drink rosé champagne with the oysters. That seems about right. What do you think, Barbara? Do you approve?
I do. Actually, I'm drinking a rosé, a Dahlheim rosé from South Africa that I really like with oysters. I've never been able to like the idea of some of those heavier wines they recommend, like a Sauterne, because I think that the oyster then gets overwhelmed. But I'm really just, I mean, I hardly even drink, so I know very little about wine, and you know, I mostly drink rosé, as a matter of fact. But I think it's great with
She
oysters.
likes fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Nothing wrong with that either. I know.
Doug strikes me as a bubbling pink rosé drinker, you know, from way back.
The only reason I don't drink red wine is I have terrible rosacea, and red wine is the trigger for it.
Oh.
So if I do, I turn into Bozo the Clown. And that's the reason that rosé and white wine are my thing. I actually wept a few tears over your Chateau Lafite, thinking I wish I could actually drink it, but there we were. Patrick, should we wind up, or is there anything else that somebody would like to ask?
I think it's devolved into a good time to stop.
Okay, that sounds great. So let me say once again that we will not know till next week, due to shipping problems, how many sets of the wonderful extra insert and how many actual books signed by Doug and Lincoln we have. We can't count them till they get here. So if you would like to click on the link and put yourself on the wait list, we will be in touch with you as soon as we are able to figure it out. Anyway, guys, it's been, as always, a joy to talk to both of you, and we'll do it again in February. So thank you for joining us, and thank you, all of you who've taken time to watch it. We will have a podcast available, and the video will stay up forever. So if you know Preston and Child fans who couldn't make this particular time slot, they can easily catch it later. Do we have time for a couple last minute questions?
I don't care. Yeah, I have some people that did try to ask, and I just missed their questions. Deanna just says, I really would like to know more about Viola. What's going on there?
Oh dear. Well, she's in the green room, shall we say. We have a couple of characters that we love to bring back. Viola Mascaline. You okay, Doug?
No, I just my lamp just fell.
Oh.
It's good though.
Okay.
No worries.
We have see Viola Mascaline again, and then we're always afraid people are going to ask us what happened to Pendergast's kid. You know, we have some homework that we're way behind on, and Viola is part of that. So to the person who asked that question, that's a very shrewd question. Thank you. We haven't forgotten about her, or Stacy Beaudry, or any of those other people out there who deserve to come back.
Let's see. Divine asks, I really want to know more about Constance's backstory and how she appeared in the mansion and how she hid in the lower rock levels under the house.
Well, that's a very interesting question, because The next novel after Bloodless is going to explain and going to go into her backstory in a very interesting and thorough way. And a lot of mysteries about her are going to be revealed, some very surprising ones.
Now, okay, just maybe one more here. About the graveyard, there were a couple people that asked early on about the graveyard, if you both had a chance to spend time there exploring. And
I found Doug there one morning with a bottle of Matus and he was sleeping under a bush. So I think he explored it quite thoroughly. But no, as Doug mentioned earlier, that cemetery in particular is a a hallmark of Savannah, and we both spent a lot of time there, just enraptured by the gravestones and by the if you can call it beautiful, the beautiful art in the tombs.
If anyone's really interested in cemeteries, if you go to Paris, Père Lachaise is certainly worth your time. There's a wonderful one, trying to think of the name of it, in Boston, that is well worth reading the tombstones because they have a lot of American history.
Coops Hill, is that Doug, right, Doug?
Yeah, I know what cemetery you're talking about. I'm trying to remember the name.
Coops Hill burying ground.
Yeah, some of those gravestones go back to the early 1700s, late 1600s.
Yeah, and there's one outside Winston-Salem, which is where they're not Amish, but they're a Mennonite sect, and even in death, the sexes are segregated. It's you always wonder how they really reproduced. I have never quite figured it out, but in any case, there are wonderful cemeteries all around the country, and if you're a history buff, you can learn a remarkable amount about
New Orleans. New Orleans is a great cemetery town.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, if you ever go to Buenos Aires, the very first thing they take you to is the Recoleta Cemetery to show you where Eva Perón is buried. It's like the #1 tourist attraction in Buenos Aires, Argentina. So probably says a lot about how we want to connect with our past and, review our history. All right. Anything else?
Well, there you go, folks. We asked some overtime questions for you. That's probably good.
Well, all right. Then once again, thank you guys for joining us again. We thank all of you for watching us. Today is publication day for the 20th landmark book, Floodless. So enjoy it. And we'll see you again in February or on November 4th with Doug or with Lincoln when he finishes his book, because Lincoln and I have done a number of events together for the enigmologists. That's such a hard word to say.
Enigmologist, yeah, Jeremy shall return. But I want to thank for both Doug and myself, Barbara, as always, being indefatigable. We couldn't do what we do without her. Patrick, thank you so much for setting us up. And to our readers, both you who are virtually at the Poison Pen or would normally be there in person, thank you very much. And Doug and I would ask you to please be careful and take care of yourselves in these strange times we find ourselves in.
Thank you. Yes, we all would urge you to do that. It is a very unpredictable and scary time, almost as scary as the supernatural elements that show up in the Pendergast books. But which of us thought that we would actually be living in a Pendergast book? And we sort of are, if you think about it. So maybe that's why it's so compelling reading just at the moment. Good night, everybody.
Good night, Barbara. Thank you all.
Thanks. Thank you, everybody.
Hello. We hope you're enjoying our programs and podcasts with authors. We'd like to expand them, and your help would be appreciated. Please make a donation at poisonedpenfoundation.org. 100% of the proceeds will go to help connect authors with readers in this difficult time. Thank you.